When you think of your favorite coaster park, it's probably loaded with great rides. But all of these theme parks started somewhere. They laid that foundation that made them into a coaster destination, and sometimes it all starts with that great first major coaster. Today, let's go around the world and find the best examples of coasters that put their park on the map. Just a couple ground rules for this video. First, the coaster cannot have opened with the park. It's too hard to separate the effect of the park opening versus the coaster opening. Second, the park has to have followed with other coasters worth riding. So, those parks with one coaster, or where the coaster is the only decent thing about the park, it doesn't qualify. Finally, these are the coasters that captured people's attention, not necessarily the first coaster these parks opened. Also, thanks to Pipe Picasso for this video idea. Number 20, Expedition GeForce at Holiday Park. For 23 years now, Holiday Park has been defined by Expedition GeForce, widely regarded as one of the top coasters in the world. But this came around in 2001. That was the park's 30th anniversary. Over its first 30 years, it had a wooden wild mouse, and it had the first ever Vekoma coaster. But no doubt, Expedition GeForce put this place on the map. Since then, they added Skyscream, a very well-themed Skyrocket 2, but the big addition is coming in 2026. This is another Tomorrowland theme Mock Rides Extreme Spinner, maybe the next ride to happiness, giving this park an incredible 1-2 punch. Number 19, Manta at SeaWorld San Diego. This park dates all the way back to 1964, getting its first coaster on its 40th anniversary, Journey to Atlantis. This water coaster was all they had for 8 years, and San Diego finally joined the other SeaWorld parks in having a real coaster people wanted to ride, opening Manta in 2012. This family-friendly mock multi-launch covers 2,800 feet of track, only rises up 30 feet, hits 43 miles an hour. A very good custom layout that's just pure fun. This made coaster enthusiasts want to get back to the park, and mark the start of 4 more coasters to come over the next 11 years. Number 18, Condor at Wallaby Holland. This park opened in 1971. It had some small and portable coasters to start. Didn't do much coaster-wise over its first 2 decades. But then, they got everyone's attention with El Condor in 1994. This was the first ever Vekoma SLC, and at the time, the idea of a looping coaster under the track was pretty new, introduced just 2 years earlier. This was the first time anyone other than B&M tried it, so it was a big deal. These SLCs caught on big time, and we're all thankful for it, I'm sure. A few years later, Premier Parks bought the park, and they got 4 coasters in 2000 alone, adding some world-class rides, making this park in the Netherlands a destination for European coaster travelers. Number 17, Thunder Road at Carowinds. After this park opened in 1973, they had Carolina Gold Rusher and that was it. They were having some bad growing pains, and the park was acquired by the King's Entertainment Company. They did what they love to do, add a family wooden coaster in 1975, and then a big dual-track racing wooden coaster, serving as a headliner, Thunder Road, opening in 1976. This made the park interesting, and they followed with White Lightning in 1977 and Carolina Cyclone in 1980, the world's first coaster with 4 inversions. Since then, Paramount and Cedar Fair have added a ton of coasters, making this one of America's premier coaster parks. Number 16, Hoosier Hurricane at Indiana Beach. This park dates back to 1926, but they were never big on coasters in the early years. They had a kids coaster, a Galaxy. Then, in 1984, they got a portable Schwarzkopf Jetstar, Tiger Coaster. But I feel the big coaster that put them on the map was Hoosier Hurricane. This is a major wooden coaster, built by the brand new CCI in 1994. This being only the 3rd coaster and by far the biggest, 77 feet tall, 51 miles an hour, 2,900 feet of track, going out and back over the lake, serving as a great centerpiece of the park, spanning the entire plot. This would lead to Cornball Express, another CCI wooden coaster 7 years later, adding Lost Coaster and Steel Hog in the 2000s, and Gene Staples adding even more to the park after taking over in 2020. Number 15, Tennessee Tornado at Dollywood. This park got started in 1961, their first coaster being a wooden wild mouse called Scamper, Blazing Fury coming in 1978, and their biggest coaster for a long time was Thunder Express, an Arrow Mine Train. That was here from 1989 to 1998. That was taken out for a brand new coaster in 1999, Tennessee Tornado taking a spot in the corner of the park. This was the last Arrow Looper, different from what we are used to, a lot smoother and having big inversions. This kicked off a coaster revolution, Thunderhead coming 5 years later, then the kids coaster Sideshow Spin, followed by Mystery Mine, and 6 more to follow. Dollywood has a lot to offer, but its coaster collection is seen as one of the best in the country. Number 14, Colossus at Thorpe Park. Opening in 1979, this British park added its first coaster in 1983, Space Station Zero, a mock-powered coaster, and then the enclosed X No Way Out in 1996. Again, family-friendly. Thorpe would finally get in the coaster map in 2002, 23 years after its debut, opening the world's first coaster to hit 10 inversions, Colossus. Built by Intamin, this wasn't even 100 feet tall or 2,800 feet long, but packed in those 10 inversions in rapid fashion, including that quad heartline roll. From there, Thorpe was off and running, adding Nemesis Inferno the next year and 5 coasters since, Hyperia being their biggest and baddest opening this past year. Number 13, Cuchulainn at Emerald Park. The newest park on this list, this opened as Taito Park in 2010. They didn't even have a single coaster until 2015, but they did something that would put them in the spotlight. They opened Cuchulainn, a 105-foot tall, 3,600-foot long gravity group wooden coaster. Taito Park suddenly got interesting, adding family coasters in rapid succession from 2018 to 2022, and in 2024, they finally got their big follow-up to Cuchulainn, Fianna Force. This Vekoma STC has 3 inversions over 2,500 feet of track, interacting with another new family coaster, Quest, as Taito Park, now known as Emerald Park, keeps getting better. Number 12, Cyclops at Mount Olympus. Opening in 1990 in the tourist trap known as Wisconsin Dells. This was called Big Chief Go-Kart World, featuring, obviously, go-karts, and they decided to branch out and become a coaster park in 1995. Now, Big Chief Karts and Coasters, they opened the CCI Cyclops, using its terrain to perfection, offering some great airtime pops, having a 75-foot drop and 1,900 feet of track. The owners had a plan and they weren't shy putting it in motion, hiring CCI to build Pegasus and Zeus over the next 2 years, adding 4 more coasters between 2000 and 2006. They haven't added anything since, but those quality wooden coasters are a must-do for any coaster enthusiast hitting up the Midwest. Number 11, Great American Scream Machine at Six Flags Over Georgia. One of the original Six Flags parks, this dating back to 1967, one of just 3 to be built by the chain. They started off with a mine train, then added a mini mine train. 6 years into its life, it got its standout coaster. Great American Scream Machine was built in 1973, back when Philadelphia Toboggan Coaster still made coasters, and this thing was a beast on the lake in the back of the park. 105 feet tall, 3,500 feet of track, an L-shaped layout full of airtime. This came just a year after Kings Island opened, and Racer was given credit for starting a new coaster revolution. 5 years later, they added Mindbender, and they really took off in the 90s, 18 coasters having come and go at this massive park outside Atlanta. Number 10, Euromir at Europa Park. The Mock family opened this in 1975, believing they could use a park as a showcase for their rides. They started adding coasters in the mid-80s, starting with a family coaster, a bobsled coaster, and an indoor coaster called Eurosat in 1989. However, it was Euromir in 1997 that really got the party started. This was their first spinning coaster, very impressive visually, winding in and out of those 4 towers. And after this, Europa went crazy adding coasters, putting in 11 more between 1999 and 2024. Number 9, Great White at SeaWorld San Antonio. Before this B&M invert opened in 1997, there wasn't a single coaster anywhere in the SeaWorld chain. The park in San Antonio opened in 1988 just like the others did, focusing on shows and exhibits first and foremost. Great White's debut 9 years later was a sea change for SeaWorld as a whole, and just 2 years later, they opened the Morgan Mini Hyper Steel Eel, 4 others since then, and a new family coaster in 2025. Number 8, Lightning Loops at Six Flags Great Adventure. In 1974, this park opened its gates, but its main attraction was its safari. They had a mine train in its opening year, and they relied on small Pinfaris and Schwarzkopfs in its early years. They've seen 30 coasters come and go, and I think the first one that put it on the coaster map was Lightning Loops. This pair of Aero Shuttle Loops opened in 1978, the first edition under Six Flags ownership. 2 totally separate tracks meeting in the middle, those 2 vertical loops interlocking. This was a rare sight, and it made for great advertising. Also, the modern vertical loop had only been around for 2 years at the time, so this was the first time a lot of people had seen anything like this. Rolling Thunder was added a year later, and they were off and running into the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and they even have 2 more coasters coming in the next 2 years. Number 7, Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. The same year, Arrow built interlocking loops at Great Adventure. They were busy doing the same thing at Busch Gardens, the old country. They hit the ground running on coasters, opening in 1975 with Glissade, a Schwarzkopf Jetstar, the next year adding a Wild Mouse and a kids coaster, and 3 years into its life, opened its premier coaster. Loch Ness Monster had those 2 brilliant yellow loops, one over the other, all part of the same coaster, 130 feet tall, 3,200 feet of track. And this coaster let everyone know that Busch Gardens was going to be a major player. They proved that with Big Bad Wolf in 1984, Drakenfire in 1992, Alpengeist in 1997, and they just keep on going, adding 9 more over the last 25 years. Number 6. Phoenix at Knoebels. This park has such a rich history, going back to 1926, getting a family coaster in 1955, a Schwarzkopf Jetstar in 1977, and they made the bold decision to move a wooden coaster from San Antonio, Texas to this park in the mountains of Pennsylvania in 1985. Known as Rocket, now using the name Phoenix, this ride really did rise from the ashes from a park that shut down 5 years prior, and Knoebels had just adopted an absolute grand slam of a coaster. Not only does this keep winning the golden ticket for best wooden coaster year after year, it sparked a wave of more extreme coasters to follow. Whirlwind in 1993, Twister in 1999, 4 more after that, but even to this day, enthusiasts make the trip to Knoebels mainly to ride Phoenix. Number 5. Kraken at SeaWorld Orlando. We talked about Great White getting the SeaWorld party started, and a year later in 1998, Orlando opened Journey to Atlantis. However, it was the giant B&M Flores that came to the park in 2000 that made SeaWorld a true coaster destination. 27 years after the park opened in 1973, Kraken opened as the premier Flores coaster in the country. 149 feet tall, 7 inversions over 4,200 feet of track, and this started a wave of B&Ms into the park. Manta, Mako, Pipeline, Penguin Trek, add in Icebreaker. Suddenly, this park has 8 coasters that cannot be passed up for any thrill seeker coming to Orlando. Number 4. Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa. The Old Country may have gotten their premier coaster in 1978, but their sister park in Florida had to wait longer. Opening in 1959, their main focus was beer, plants, and wildlife, and the first coaster came 17 years later, Python in 1976. Scorpion would come after, a compact portable Schwarzkopf, and they rode these 2 coasters for 13 years. Busch Gardens Tampa landed the first large-scale B&M coaster ever built, Kumba, and that made its debut in 1993. There would be no more major gaps in their coaster additions, getting Montu 3 years later, adding major new coasters every 3 to 5 years, currently sporting 9 and having 13 overall. Number 3. Revolution at Six Flags Magic Mountain. In 1971, Newhall Land and Farm opened this to bring people to Valencia, California, hoping they'd like the area and buy a house. It opened with Gold Rusher, the Aero Mine Train. Mountain Express came 2 years later, but they made waves with the Great American Revolution. This would be the first modern coaster with a vertical loop, such a groundbreaking coaster for its time, and this drew people to this 5-year-old park from around the world. They would make another huge splash 2 years later with Colossus. Six Flags would take over the park in 1979, and this has grown to be the biggest coaster park in the world, the first park to ever have 20 operational coasters at one time. Number 2. Corkscrew at Knott's Berry Farm. Opening in 1920 as a chicken restaurant, Ghost Town was created just to give people something to do while they waited. Rides started popping up, and suddenly, there was a little theme park right here in Buena Park, California. It would keep growing over the decades, and in 1975, they got their first coaster. It was quite the first impression, Corkscrew being the first modern coaster to go upside down, beating Revolution to the punch by a full year. This would lead to the Wacky Soapbox Racers the year after, Montezuma's Revenge 2 years after that, and even after Corkscrew was taken out in favor of Boomerang in 1989, Knott's continued to pack in the coasters, having 15 in its lifetime, all starting with Corkscrew. Number 1. Raven at Holiday World. When kids hear about a town called Santa Claus, Indiana, they want to stop and meet Santa. The Cook family capitalized on this idea, creating Santa Claus Land in 1946 as a tourist trap, and as most parks do, it evolved over time into a major theme park. They had a kiddie coaster first. Its first adult coaster was a Benfari Cyclone called Blitzen. That came in 1981, and by 1984, the park had outgrown Christmas, celebrating all the holidays at once, and now becoming Holiday World. One of their sections was themed to Halloween, and in 1995, they opened the CCI wooden coaster called the Raven. This wasn't very big, only having an 85-foot drop and 2,800 feet of track, but it was universally acclaimed, and it won 4 golden tickets for best wooden coaster in the world. 5 years later, they would go back to CCI for another wooden coaster, the Legend, and 6 years after that, after CCI went under and its engineer started the Gravity Group, they were hired to build the Voyage, one of the most impressive and longest wooden coasters ever, claiming 5 golden tickets of its own. Holiday World has also added the first ever launched B&M wing coaster, and a Vekoma family Boomerang since then, making this little park in the middle of nowhere, Indiana into a major coaster destination, and it all started with the Raven. That's a wrap on this video. Let me know what you think of my picks, and if there's any other coaster you can think of that would fit the bill. I only chose 20 based on my criteria, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other great ones out there, so if you got one, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. I want to thank my Patreons. If you want bonus access, bonus content, and have your name listed at the end of each video, check my links below and join. Also, check out my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.